Hello, this is Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. This video's about the lab. Actually, part two of the lab. I already created a video about part one, and so this is pretty much part two of the 5-3 lab. So I think a few things I wanted to kind of mention first. One is the Chrome web store here. Now there's some tools for React. So you can go to the Chrome Web Store, okay, and then in there, go ahead and search for React Developer Tools. And so you can go ahead and grab this. It's very beneficial. Mine's already installed, but you can go ahead and install this React Developer Tools, okay. And then within your browser, once you do that, if you go to, let's just go to this. So I'm going to go to F12 and in here, oh, actually I don't need to go that far, but I'll show you more about this in the future, here as we go along in this video. But if up here on the top where your extensions are, it'll show React Developer Tools once you have that. I also have this ad blocker. You may have some other ones, but if it's installed properly, you should be able to click on extensions up here in the bar, and you should see React Developer Tools. Okay, and here in a little bit, we'll see where that comes into play within the browser itself. Okay. The next thing I kind of wanted to do here, let me fix this up a little bit here, just to kind of look at the code, more of a review, because I know early on it's kind of confusing. You got your front end, your back end, and so basically our root directory is our API where we have our routes and everything. So that's our back end, right? And our back end runs on our local. It's basically running within a terminal. We started in a terminal, even though from our perspective we're looking at it being within Visual Studio Code, but actually you're creating that, you're instantiating that, starting that from within a terminal, right? So it runs within a terminal, your back end. And then, we went ahead and used in our index.js file, and I know I kind of mentioned this before, but, we went ahead and added our static, express static, the front end distribution, right? So this is just kind of simpler way to handle that, right? So this is including that static content. So remember, our back end is made of Express. It's on the server side. It's a server side Node application using Express, right? Where our front end is React, and React only runs within the browser. Okay, only runs within the browser, all the code. And then we obviously used Vite. Vite's a build tool, and we use Vite to build it, to take our JSX files and everything else, make it into something more condensed and make it understandable by the browser, right? So within our front end, so as I kind of suggested you do, I'm not quite sure what you did at the very first part of the 5.3 lab as far as I suggested go ahead and forget about auth just at the beginning. Try to do those other things that are there as far as adding the nav bar and navigation and so forth. And then also you have the date formatting and also the toastify. So there were some other things to do there as well. Plus there were some other requirements in there besides just that. Even besides just the authentication part of it. But also, just kind of want to mention here, so here is the, sometimes can be very confusing. You got your different package.json file. You can have one for the front end and one for the back end, or in our case, it's just the root directory. So here's the one for Veet. So what we're going to go ahead and do, and I know I've gone through this already, but we're going to have to build this thing, right? Now you could just to do some of the static stuff without having to worry about it getting before it gets integrated with your backend service, your API. You can build all this stuff. You could just do a Veet dev, which this is just going to run this, fire up this server, right? Just on the front end, and then you can do things. But now, once we're going to put the API stuff in there, we're going to have to do things a little differently, okay? So here, we're just going to go ahead and, for our sake, we're just going to go ahead and start the API server in our root directory, right? So what I would do is new terminal here. Let me make this a little bigger. And I would go ahead and create an additional one. And so you can do that down here by clicking the little plus sign, right? Another new terminal. So you got two of them. The first one, the second one. The first one, go ahead and CD to front end. Okay. And I'm hoping that yours is set up like this. Depends on, maybe some students might have done things a little differently. But, you got your front end, and obviously in the root, you got all your API backend server stuff. And then in here, this other one, so we're going to have two terminals, one for our front end and one for that. But we're not going to start like the server for the front end. We're just going to go ahead and have that there because we're going to have to do some builds now and then, some Veet builds, right? So for now, we're just going to go ahead and do our npm run start dev. Right? So this is just within our root directory, and then we can start that up. Okay. So I just suggest you do this just to kind of keep things, because every once in a while, once you make some changes, it's not going to get reflected unless you build it again, right? So in the front end here, you got this dist directory. So when you add your components, you make any changes to any of these files, it's not going to be picked up until you do a Veet build, right? That's going to create this directory, which gets read in the index.js file, right? All right. So first here, let's go ahead and look at the login. So in front end components, and you'll see some things that might be a little different than what you have. This was a specific student's code at a certain point in time. What I did was, and I probably should show you this at some point, you can actually grab code out of GitHub at a certain point in time by using whenever you check in code, you have a little ID there, right? It labels them, okay? It labels your check-in. So there's a way to actually just get something from your within your local repository just at a certain point in time. And that's what I actually did kind of when this student did his 5.3 lab. So how this thing looks now, that you're on this left-hand side, how this looks now and how it looked for his final project at the end of the course is different, okay? So this is kind of what, this student did at this point in time, okay? So this wasn't his finished product. This is what he just kind of did for this lab, okay? So we're going to come in here to the, let's see, login form, .jsx. Let's take a look at this a little bit. So in here, a lot of this looks familiar, right? So you should already have things like this, okay? You should have this, your email and your password, right? If you kind of did some of the stuff in the 5.3 lab for show error, show success on login, you should already have these as well, Okay. Um, he added some other things here, but that's okay. Um, so what you're going to do is within your login form, you're going to want to use what's called use effect. Okay. And use effect is one of the React hooks. So is use state. Use state is a React hook. Okay. Use effect is a React hook that allows functional components to perform kind of side effects. And side effects are operations that interact outside of your specific application right here. Within, I shouldn't say application, but within this React environment, right? So you hitting that back end API, that's external, right? So you're going to have to handle that in a certain way. And I'll show you why you really have to do that here in a second. Let's see what they did here. So actually, after looking at this a little more, it's not as important, or the use effect is really important especially when you're making a call to something like the user list or something like that, okay? So this login form is basically just going to display a HTML form, which you have on the left-hand side here, right? And then within here, you're going to submit, right? So you should have your submit form on your form tag down here. Let's see. Okay, where's our form? I guess I just search, make life easier. Okay, so on submit, you're going to handle submit. All right. And then if you go to handle submit, first thing you want to do is prevent default. We've already kind of went through this. And here it's kind of doing some basic validation. I believe in the lab it asks you for some basic validation. And there may be some other things in that lab. Okay, there may be some other things in that lab that are not necessarily in his code here. I'm not 100% on every single scenario. But, it asks you to make sure it includes a @ sign and so forth. So this is what this is kind of doing here. Okay. And then after that, what you're wanting to do is go ahead and you're going to use axios, okay, to post. So, and I want to show you another thing is here. We really want to try to avoid this URL like this, right? This is called a fully qualified path, right? So this is only going to work on a local machine. Localhost is always local to a user's computer usually, right? When you deploy applications to cloud environments or other type environments, you're not using localhost, okay? So like part of the final project is actually to deploy your application. And in this case, that's probably going to be a problem. I guarantee it's going to be a problem if you have your URL like this, okay? So really what you're wanting to do is you really want to go ahead and get rid of that, okay? And later I'll show you how we can, not today, but later I'll show you how we can correctly set up the environment. So like when we have a domain name for our, like a cloud environment, we did the Google Cloud at the beginning of this class. Some of the students that completed that towards the beginning. We were really supposed to do it all along. That's okay if you didn't. But I will go through what that's going to take to make that happen, okay? But right now, this should be relative to your domain that you're on. So when we're hitting that local host, it should be relative to that. And that's how we want this to be, okay? And also, this is a post request for a login. It's passing in an email and a password, okay? Then we have this with credentials, okay? So with credentials, and what that does, it includes cookies in the request, Okay, so once we log in, if you recall how when we used Postman, we could look at the auth token within Postman. Well, we're not using Postman here, so we're actually setting cookies on the in the local storage. And I know some of the students and most of the students in this class, we did a little bit with local storage in the previous course. Did a little bit with local storage. So what you're doing is you're saving a cookie with your auth token on as a local storage cookie. Okay, and we'll look at that here in a bit within the browser. So with credentials, yeah, it's going to include cookies in this request. Okay. Another thing that's really beneficial here is to create what's called an interceptor, so that anytime we're doing whenever we're doing a get, a post, we're doing anything, we can use an interceptor. We'll intercept this request and add things to make sure the authentication stuff works. Okay, so let's look at that. And this is something I'm going to send you. So here we're using a use effect within the app.jsx file. And so this sets up an axios interceptor to automatically add the authorization header. Now, you can set this header. Okay, so the reason you have to have a header is you have to send, when we're sending request and response, we're sending more than just a URL. There's other stuff that's involved in that, right? There's other things. It's just not that URL. Behind the scenes, there's also a header and so forth. So we're sending, in this case, we want to make sure we send this header with authorization, and we want to send it like this, okay? So this way, we can go ahead and define this in our app.jsx file, so that every time we use Axios, it's going to go ahead and take care of this. And as you can see, it's going in here into local storage, finding out if this token already exists. If it exists, it goes ahead and adds it in there. Okay? So once it's already in local storage, it's going to keep on putting it in there every time you make another request. Right? So I will go ahead and send you this code. And a big thing of this is kind of let's see, it always has a cleanup thing. Is we're just kind of getting rid of the interceptor here. We clean it up, so to speak. Okay. But I will send you this, and I think this is a good idea. Otherwise, then you're going to have to put this stuff like in every request and that. This way, you're doing it kind of in one place. Okay. So back to our login form. So for our Axios, we go ahead and make our call. Then from here, we use a then. This is a promise, right? Then, here's the response. Is the status code equal to 200, right? Okay, and then we call this on login. That was our on login that we had, right? Part of the earlier part of this lab. So we have our on login, so that way we are going to print out a message on that, right? Originally this was here, but this is kind of a little bit redundant because actually on login, we let me see if we can get to that on login. Yeah, it's going to do it for here, but them are all defined within your app.jsx file, right? You should have your on login, and this one does a show success, login success, right? So where you do this login, in this form, there's no reason to go ahead and do that a second time, right? This would be redundant because on login takes care of that. Okay, so let's log in, and then I'll show you the cookie in the browser, and we'll take a look at everything else as well. All right, so let's log in here. So before we start this, let's look. So kind of just to mention this before, the fact that React runs in the front end, right? It runs within the browser. So, how we did in the back end, the API, we did all the debug user, debug bug, right? We had all those debug statements that are printed once which are printed in your terminal, right? Let's see, helps if I'm on the right one here. All these different statements. Here's your database stuff, right? Things like that. It prints out these messages, right? Well, for the front end, it's not going to do that. You're in the browser now, so your messages you're gonna use console.logs to log to your console, so you can see them within the console of the browser. Okay. So I'm going to log in here. Login successful. That's a little Toastify thing. I'm going to click users. Now, yours is going to look different. This is what this student does. This final project and these labs, there's flexibility. You just kind of got to meet some of the basic requirements. But, from there, you can go ahead and do your own thing. Everyone should look different, right? So this is kind of what this student did. And like I said, this was at a point in time. After this, he made a bunch of changes. It looked actually very much different. Okay, this was just at a point in time. So I'm going to click users up here, and it's going to bring up users. As you can see, it says user list loaded successfully. Here's our two different users, and I actually forgot to show you the F12 here. And so you click F12 and just remember you've got these different options, right? So elements, console. So console is going to be very important for you. Okay, and here's some of the things that this student went ahead and had some console.log log statements, and that's what's printing out here. So this console is going to be, your best friend here, because you're going to run into problems that you're going to do something, and all of a sudden you're not going to see anything in your screen at all, right? You're going to have some errors, and you're going to have a blank screen, and there's going to be nothing in the terminal stating anything. So you're going to have to come in here and learn how to kind of debug things, right? But also the other one up here that I kind of wanted to show you, that I meant to show you right after we logged in, is application. And within application, you've got your different storages, right? So under local storage, here's your auth token. Okay. So this is what gets sent, and this kind of gets sent back and forth, right? That's why why we should set that stuff in up our app JMX file with the interceptor in that, so we kind of add that to each request back and forth. Okay. Now let me show you. I want to create an error here. Let me create something that's an error. All right. So this user has, a user list. He's also using a user list item. So each one of the users is going to be an item within the user list page. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and create an error. So I'm going to change this to roles. Roles is not defined. I'm going to save this now. I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go ahead and come back to my front end, and I'm going to go ahead and build this. And like I said, probably make sure you log out. Make sure that you don't have a. I would, it depends on what you're doing. But I've had different results sometimes. I would think it would work. So here you have no cookie. But just try it out. Different things. You'll learn as you go on that. What works and what doesn't. It kind of depends on how some things are configured and how the student has this configured right now as well. All right. So here I'm just going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to go to users. I have this user. So this on the right hand side, this student had a user list and then had user list item, right? So in user list, it has a collection of items, which is basically a user, right? Each one's a user. And also for roles, it went ahead and this student went ahead and put his roles in a array as opposed to just a string. So either way is okay. In the real world, sometimes, smaller organizations, sometimes you're given multiple, you might be giving multiple roles. You may just have one role. In a large organization, usually things are a little more specific, that, you're a developer, that. But, sometimes in small organizations, you might be a tester and a developer. You could have multiple roles. So that way, sometimes an array of roles makes a lot of sense. And so this user went ahead and did the array of roles. Okay. Like I said, you can do either way: a string array, just on a role string, or a array. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click users, and I'm expecting this to blow up because this was undefined. And as you can see, nothing's happening here. So if we come in here and hit F12, okay, we see our cookie. We go to console. Okay, you'll see this error here. And if you click on this, sometimes this isn't the best either. I know this is very confusing. It says roles is not defined. Okay, so that's giving you a hint, right? You click on this, it's going to go, may not go where you want it to go. I guess at some point you're trying to use roles, it's not defined. So, I know this is not easy. You'll have to kind of work through this a little bit. Okay. Then obviously the easy thing is to come back in your code and look. In this case, it's highlighted in red. You made a mistake there, right? But it did say roles is not defined. So you'd come back in, look for roles, and say, okay, yeah, I need to fix that. You can save that. And then after you save it, it's not going to reflect till you build it again, right? So we're going to do another build. Let's see what we can get away with here. I'm thinking that we're not going to get away with just like refreshing or anything. I think this is actually going to log us out by default. It is. Let me look at, do we have a cookie in there still? If we do, I'm going to get rid of that. I know this is a pain, but it's reality here for this. All right. Obviously, when things are working, then it's not a problem. But so now we're going to come back in here. I'll log in. Now we go to users. We fixed it. Everything's fine now, right? The important things are, really, you're going to have to really spend some time with the tools here, the Chrome developer tools, and also, like I said, you have the ones for React. So when we seen that error, that's because that error that was React. That was using the React developer tools. Okay, and here, so like I said, it's a good idea to use some console.logs so you can see what you have, right? And like I said, in this case, this user was using, or the student, I should call the user, this student is using an array for the roles. You can use just a single one, and in his case, he has an array, and you have to kind of work through that array to get what you need out of it, right? But yeah, console.log files are going to help, and like I said, that's all for the front end stuff. That's the only way you're going to be able to have log file. Not that there's not other ways to do that. They're a little more complex. But, just do a console.log so you can see the state of different things, see what the value of different things is. Okay. So let's look at this. This is the user list. And it has this use effect. Okay. So it has this use effect where if you've got your fetching users, okay. And like I said, make sure that you only make this a relative path and not with localhost and everything in there. You really just want it relative. That's going to help out when you deploy it outside of, your local machine, your local PC or laptop. Now, since we have that app.jmx where we have that interceptor, we really don't have to do this again. We really don't have to do this. We do have to, on login though, it's important. When we did our login, let's not look at that. That caused confusion there. With our login, you do want to add this with credentials equals true. Okay, you do want to add that there. And here, you shouldn't have to do this. You're already logged in. It's going to call that, and once it's logged in, when you log in, it's going to put that cookie out there, right? And so when the next time you make a request, so in this case, we're getting the user list. We're getting that user list. The app.js is going to take care of that. It's this interceptor here, right? So this is going to intercept every request, and it's going to say, hey, I need to get this item out of local storage, okay? I need to get this item out of local storage. If it's there, go ahead and send that here, all right? So once you log in, it's going to be in local storage. Then you can just go ahead and grab that, right? And so here's your header, right? So you shouldn't have to do that header again. Not a big deal if you do. I'm just pointing that out, okay? So basically, we should be able to get rid of this altogether here. Okay. Now I do want to mention about this use effect. So we got this fetch users, okay? You got this fetch users. Let me see how we're doing this. So let's just say, yeah, creates this down here. So with the use effect, you went ahead and this is your side effect. This is what you're wanting to do. This is the external thing you're wanting to do. You're wanting to call this API, right? So this is the external thing, very useful for use effect. And then after you do that, you want to go ahead and just call fetch. So I will go ahead and send you the use effect from this one, just so you can see how this was done. You can do things a little differently. That's your option. But the important thing about use effect is, it's really, really beneficial, especially when you're making that, especially coming in a page, like as soon as you come in a page, you're going to grab a user list or a bug list, something, you're making a call right when you come in, like that. So it's very beneficial in that case. Something like a login screen. A login screen, you basically just have a blank screen. So you're not really doing much as far as the API calls not until you submit something, right? If the API calls not until you submit something on the page and nothing else happens, then you just use that, when you do your handle submit, right? When you hit your submit button. So, but I'll go ahead and send you the use effect for this one. You don't have to necessarily do it that way, but just wanted to kind of provide that. So I'm going to provide you that. And I also want to give you the that interceptor as well that you're going to put in the app.jmx. Let's also look at that again one more time here. So in the labs, originally we're just talking about, the basics here. Where, so here you got a login form. Well, you're going to want to pass in this on login. You're going to pass in the show error, and you want to pass in show success. Okay. So you're going to pass those in pretty much all of these for the most part. Well, not login. Login's just for the login. For logout, you just handle it within your code itself. Now this user had some things that are a little bit different. Okay, so I would refer to the lab. I don't want to mix one thing with another. It could be kind of confusing. It has a landing page. It's calling its home page a landing page. Okay, but you know, here's your login, your register, your bugs. You want to make sure you're passing off into each one, right? And then your show error success and show success into each one. You can pass other things as well. Okay, but this is shown by default. Basically, if you just got a default, by default, it's going to go to login. It uses as that navigate, right? And then also within your code, there's going to be times that you're going to be doing some certain functions. Let me see in here what he has. Let's see, that was that editor here. So after you handle the submit, so probably here what you want to do is, so here's a situation where it's the user editor, you made some changes. Once you make some changes, you want to kind of navigate to something, right? So, and it all depends on how your screen's set up. You know, some users have everything like next to each other where that's not really the case, but sometimes, you know, in this case, they're kind of a little bit separate pages in a way, right? So you kind of want to navigate to the next thing, and so you're navigating back to the user list here, right? After doing an edit of a user. So that's all in the handle submit of that one. Let's see what it has up here. Use effect. So here on your use effect, you're just basically getting your user, right? In your use effect, you're getting your user. You're fetching one user. In the handle submit, right? That's where you put on your form. That's where you're updating it, right? You're doing your patch here. All right, so I guess that's all I have. Let me think, is there anything else? Navigate different pages. So let me know if you have any questions about anything. Don't hesitate to reach out. I know this stuff can be tricky, a little bit confusing, so please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks a lot.